Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here with Consolidated Planning Group. We're happy to be partnering again with Benicia with Liberty ISD. So thank you for joining us today. Let me just go through a couple of housekeeping items. We are in webinar mode, and that means that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there. And as we're going through this presentation today, if you have questions, we ask that you put those in the chat box. Benicia's going to be watching the chat box, and we're going to take the questions throughout, and we aim to answer just as many as we can throughout the presentation. Today, we are recording this webinar, and you will get an email with a link to the recording and a copy of the slides, so you don't have to take notes of every single thing you hear, because you are going to get a copy of the slides. We have some people that join us by podcast, and so if you are hearing this presentation by podcast and you would like a copy of the corresponding slides, you can email us at contact@cpgcares.net or call us at 281-690-1177. All of our presentations after the fact live on our YouTube channel. It's the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. There'll be a link for that in the slides as well. There's over 200 webinars on topics pertaining to special needs and special needs planning. So it can be really used as a resource, and you can kind of peruse those topics and see, where are you in your planning trail and what questions do you have the most, and you can go to those specific topics. The thing is as a parent, which I am, so I eat, sleep, and breathe this both as a parent, parents 4 and 2 with special needs. There's a lot of information, and oftentimes as parents, we feel like we're drinking from the fire hose, and I don't know what I don't know. I hear that all the time. Or I feel so confused, or I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing and mess everything up, or things like that. It comes up all the time. So these presentations are designed to give you the tools and resources that you need to advocate for your loved one with special needs and to achieve the success that you hope for. So Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs planning firm. If you've joined us before, we're glad that you're back. If this is your first time joining us, we are nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. A lot of times there's a lot of confusion on what we do as a firm and what, say, an estate planning attorney or a special needs attorney does. A lot of times we get calls all the time for things like, hey, I need to set up guardianship, or I need to set up a special needs trust, or my will is outdated, and things like that. And while we work very, very closely with special needs planning attorneys, and almost every single one of the clients that we're working with needs, help in that area, there's a legal document. I always kind of tongue-in-cheek say we're the money and they're the paper. So the legal documents matter. But if we don't know where the funding is coming for the future care for our loved ones, the documents don't even matter if we don't know how we're going to fund their care. So people come to us for future care cost estimates. How much do I need to fund the special needs trust to pay for future care for my loved one? They look at lifetime care plans, transition planning, setting up ABLE accounts, all kinds of advocacy and things like that, and putting some protection plans in place. What happens when we're gone? What happens to my loved one when we're gone? So we're able to help with all of those things. And I always just like to explain the differences between what the attorney does and what the advisor does. There's over 250,000 financial advisors in the U.S., and of those, about 125 total, not 125,000, are nuanced in special needs. And when we're planning for our loved one with a disability, our situation is truly specialized. And so you do want to work with a specialist when you're doing your planning, so that way that you make sure that you have things set up properly and things set up in such a way that would not disqualify them or cause them to lose eligibility for any state and federally funded programs, and that's very important. So today, we're talking about transitions, tips for launching your special needs teen into adulthood. And so Michelle Morris is a partner on my team, and so sometimes she does this presentation. You may have met her before. But so I think, first things first, I always say this, this journey as parents, I call it the relentless pursuit of information. That's how I felt as a parent, because we're always, we're always changing. It's the changing tide, and finally we knock one thing out that was, problematic, and it's no longer a problem, and things are going well, and then they grow up a little, or they change, or they're their next age, and we have a new set of things that we're looking at, and sometimes as parents we're feeling a little unprepared on, okay, now how do we deal with this? So when it comes to transitions, that word is thrown around in our community so often, and transition can mean a lot of things to in a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. And so today, what I'm really not talking about is medical transition, which I have to say is a big deal, because we've been living in the cocoon of pediatrics when it comes to medicine. And when we're, transitioning into adulthood, that cocoon is not as tight and, as comfortable. So obviously transitioning in medicine is a big deal, for, each area has, various transition medicine facilities. I know in Houston, Baylor has a really great transition program, but these are things that you don't want to sneak up on you. So this is not what that presentation is about, but I just want to tell you from firsthand experience, you don't want that to sneak up on you, where the pediatrician or the longtime pediatric neurologist or some cardiologist, whoever you've been working with forever, all of a sudden says, well, such and such is an adult, and we're not going, after today, we're not going to be seeing them anymore. And it's kind of a shock to the system, especially if you've been working with somebody you love. But really, we're thinking about education. We're thinking about what's next. We're thinking about financial. We're thinking about benefits and how things change, once your child turns 18, and what they may or may not qualify. But no matter what, we always say they are where they are. Okay. So, I think as parents, we worry if we have children that are behind, maybe behind academically or behind maturity, behind, we always worry about that. So always, they're really not behind. They just are where they are. So it's really, really important that we set realistic expectations. So what does this transition look like? Understanding those diagnoses and those challenges that come along with those diagnoses, as well as the strengths. But what does our path look like? Is it a traditional path? Is they're going to go, to high school? They're going to graduate high school. They could go anytime between 18 and 22. And then go on to college, or does our path look a little bit different? Maybe they're not going to the university. Maybe they're going to a transition program or an 18+ program. I think it's okay to get out of the boat, or not put yourself or your child in the box, because there is no perfect thing for each one of our kids, and so I think. If you're always looking at what the other kids are doing in the class or in parents, Facebook is the worst, right? We're seeing all the other things that everybody else is doing. But just let's just focus on your child and where they are and what their needs and wants and their goals are. And if it takes us longer to get where we're going, it doesn't matter. It's okay if you're late to the quote unquote party, but we still get there. And when we get there, we're ready. So if you show up to the party and you're unprepared, and then, we don't have the success that they hoped for, it's better to get there late to the party, totally prepared and nail it, right? So think about all of the things. We want you to keep an open mind, consider those options. I know some of our kids won't drive, but some of them may be able to drive in the future. Consider delaying that driver's license. I am a fan of disability driving schools. They're a little bit expensive, but if you're wondering, some families wonder if their kid, is going to be able to have a driver's license. The child wants a driver's license. There are a lot of disability driving schools out there that you can basically hire. They do a complete assessment. I'm thinking about our ADHD kids, or our autism, on maybe, maybe where it's affecting them a little bit less, like, we're not thinking of low functioning. I hate that term. It's the term that's thrown around so much, but I really do hate that. But some of these kids, there's total assessments that can be done. Your typical driving schools are not prepared to teach kids with disabilities how to drive, but there are schools that do. One thing that comes to mind is Tier Memorial Hermann. They have a program where basically your health insurance will pay for it, where you can get your child assessed. It's like, I forget how many call it 40-point assessment. It's the same similar assessment that they would give to somebody after they've had a stroke and rehab and they think they're ready to go back and drive. Does your child have the response time? Can they, if this happens, or this happens, how does it go? And this is like in a medical facility that they'll do that training. But if they go through and they do like an assessment like that they would do for a stroke and they pass that and they do really well, then maybe going the next step to a disability driving school and getting behind the wheel training might be a good thing. But if that test reveals that, hey, this is a horrible idea, then don't waste your money on the disability driving school at this time. Think about trade school, community college. There are so many programs. A lot of families feel discouraged. Maybe they have a loved one that has an intellectual disability, or they have a specific learning disability, maybe, with an intellectual disability of an IQ below 70. They think, are there higher education options for my loved one? And there absolutely is. There are a lot of programs out there. There are certificate programs, there are licensing programs, there's degree programs. I mean, there are short courses that might be a couple of months or a semester, and then there's longer courses that could be as long as 4 years or longer. But just know that there is a lot of things and options out there, but we always suggest that you kind of look at these things early. Texas Workforce Commission, vocational rehab, maybe your path first as our kids are maturing a little bit more. A lot of our kids with disabilities are, from a maturity perspective, are a little bit behind. Maybe they're not where they need to be to function effectively in a higher education. But the Texas Workforce Commission vocational rehab, there is a VR counselor in most schools. And this is for individuals that want to go to work that have a disability that could be an impediment to employment. And so this is a good option for a lot of people to do. They'll do testing to find out what those impediments to employment are. They'll put training programs in place to help close the gaps on those impediments to employment. There are other programs like Summer Earn and Learn and pre-employment training services and all kinds of cool stuff out there. So just think about that. I always like to mention the registered apprenticeships. There are also registered apprenticeships out there on the Department of Labor website. You can check those out for individuals with a disability, where they will learn and grow on the job while being paid. There's a lot of them out there, so do check that out. Consider a reduced course load. This is something, we have it in our mind. If you went to college and a full load was 12 hours, then we have it in our mind that a full-time college student should be 12 hours. Well, maybe your child isn't ready for 12 hours. Maybe that's too much. The Social Security Administration says that a disabled individual is a full-time student at 8 hours on the higher education level. So that's considered a full-time student in the Social Security eyes, 8 hours. And so, of course, younger years, it's a little bit different. But maybe you need to dip your toe in before you jump in, right? And so when I think about that, a lot of the community colleges have programs, the universities as well, and I'm not calling it the right name, okay, so forgive me for that, but it's like Introduction to College Studies or Introduction to Success in College. And so the course is basically teaching the individual how to succeed in higher education, because it's a totally different environment than the school, whether a private school or high school or what have you. So that might be a good dip your toe in first course. One thing that you can think about is dual credit while they're in high school. So you might be able to dip your toe in and do a dual credit course while in high school and see how that works. Consider living at home versus on campus. What are their needs? Do they have the capacity and the ability to live on campus right off? And sometimes it's a mom thing. And mom says, no way, right? And the kid says, yes way, I'm totally ready, But having some balance on that, and maybe some, Again, everybody's, what brings them here and why their child is special needs or what those diagnoses are. If they have extreme impulsivity issues, then living on campus might be disastrous. And because they will forget that they should go to school, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen. So just, we just want to put that out there, that there is no perfect straight line. So however we get to where we're going, whether it's kind of curvy and in a roundabout way or it's a straight line, it's okay. We just want to find a good fit. And what we're trying to really avoid is that the child is going to leave the public school or the private school, whatever age. It could be 18, 21, 22, whatever age that they're leaving, and that they're coming home and they're doing nothing. There's no plan. There's no transition program. There's no going to work. There's no school. And they're sitting at home and they're not having the interaction with others or growing as we want them to grow. So just thinking of all of those things are really important. So one thing that I found when we were looking at higher education options post-high school is that nothing is the same for higher education. You're not in the cocoon of the public school or the private school. Your accommodations that you've been having all of these years through your IEP or your 504, they don't transfer with you to higher education. You got to plan early for that, okay? So can you get accommodations on the higher education level? Absolutely. College, community college, university, you absolutely can, but there are some requirements. So, and what I found frustrating was that all the requirements are different. Thank you very much. So if you're looking at 5 different schools, those accommodations for each one of those schools could be vastly different. So you're going to want to go to their website. You're going to want to go to, and it could be called any number of things, disability services, Office of Disability. It could be whatever. Disability is always in the word, right? Might be ability, but anyway, those offices, if you say, if you search when you get to their page, accommodations, they're going to have an application for accommodations that's going to need to be signed off on by a doctor. And then they're going to have a list of what you need to present to them to get those accommodations, right? So you're going to want to check those requirements early, because sometimes they take time and sometimes they're backed up. And what we don't ever want the child to do is to start the semester without the accommodations in place. It's like starting with both hands behind your back, and then we wonder why they do poorly, right? So if we know that, when I think of some of the accommodations at the college level, there might be a note taker, there could be voice to text recognition software, there could be extra time. There's not usually reduced assignments. There is a such thing as extra time. It could be 100% more time. They could take their test in a non-distracted environment in a testing center. Those are some of the things and there's a lot of things. They will accept a copy of your accommodations from the school and they will look at them, but they are not obligated under any circumstances to implement all of those things. So what I want you to know is that when I am talking about what is necessary to prove this is the testing is what I'm talking about. They're looking at learning disability testing, neuropsych testing, various testing that you've had done over the years. Oftentimes they want to see that that's been updated in the last 3 to 5 years. So if you have your child that was tested at age 5 and you haven't had any testing since, it's probably time to get that done. I want you to know that if your child is in VR does a considerable amount of testing, and they may have already recently done, the neuropsych or the learning disabilities or whatever, they might test for autism. So, and if they're not in VR, if they are in VR, then they'll get some of those testings done, and it will not be paid out of pocket by you. It'll be covered by VR. So that's just a thought there if you need to get that done, because that testing could be pretty expensive. I would say on the low end, $2,500 to $5,000. It's not, as I say, it's not nothing, right? So, so think about that. But so usually it's 3 to 5 years, but this is where I'm saying that all these schools are not created equally. We saw some of this relax a little bit after COVID. Some of them have changed it. The other thing that I will mention to you is for some of us, we have kids that have a disability that doesn't change, right? That, some is very fluid and it's changing all the time. It's ever changing. It could be getting worse, could be getting better. But then we have kids that don't change, right? So if you have old testing and you're not really in the mood to drop $3,000 to $5,000 on new testing, well, you can ask the school if they will accept the old testing along with a letter from the primary care physician or the psychiatrist or the psychologist indicating that these accommodations are still necessary. This is how it's affected. I have seen schools accept a letter from a longstanding physician. I've worked with this kid for 10 years, and these are the diagnoses. This is how it affects the child. These are the accommodations that have been in place for this long, and these are appropriate, and we recommend these accommodations stay in place. So just think about that. One thing that is a little bit frustrating is when we get to the higher education level, and this is even true if you have guardianship of your child, which I want to mention. If you have guardianship of your child, there are some schools that will not take your child, okay? So you need to be aware of that. And so when you're thinking of those programs, you need to check that and you need to ask that question of, can my child go here if I have guardianship, okay? But a FERPA will be needed to release information. So even if your child is still under 18, if they're going to college, that FERPA is necessary for the school to release information to a parent. In the school, they've heard it a million times, but I pay. You take my money. What do you mean you're not going to talk to me? It's the law, guys. They're not trying to be difficult. It's just the law. So you're going to want to download that FERPA. Usually the school has a FERPA on their website, and if not, then they can email it to you, download the FERPA and have your student sign it. This is where the student would sign that they're authorizing you to be able to call on their behalf, to check in, to whatever, to look at things. That's basically what that's for. One thing I want to talk about is the SAT and the ACT. The SAT and the SAT is collegeboard.org and ACT.org, I believe. They have their own accommodations for testing. And so just because you have accommodations in the school doesn't mean that you're going to get the accommodations. There is an application on each of their websites that you download. It needs to be signed off on by a doctor, and they're going to require testing, and they're going to have different sets of rules of what they require as well. So let's not miss out on this. This is really, really important. It's an important thing that you do early. Venetia, talk to us about that. You had something you want to say.
Well, yes, I've got one daughter that just graduated from college, and I've got a current sophomore. Both of them are very dyslexic, and they receive 504 accommodations. And for my youngest one, who is again currently a sophomore, high functioning, we applied for oral admin. She's had, like you said, she's had testing done when into first grade. Had oral admin her entire life, been very successful with that. They denied it. So, and it was because they wanted updated information. So I was lucky. I knew this because of my oldest daughter. And so now, 6 months after that denial, we will finally get the assessment done. It's just so time consuming. So please start early.
Yes, I just couldn't agree more. And some of these offices of disabilities, they're backed up. And that's why I'm saying start early. If the kid's going to school in the fall, get going on this. And some of the people that do the testing are backed up. So it might be months before you get in there. And then you do the testing, and it might be weeks to months before you get the results. So it could be drama, and we don't want that to be there for you. So let's talk about the SAT and the ACT for just a minute more. It's to each his own, okay? Because a lot of parents want their kids to take these tests to practice, to see what it's like. Life has tests, and you're going to take them, okay? So there's, that school of thought. If your child is entering in through the community college, they don't have to take the SAT and ACT. You do not have to put them through that stress if you don't want to. I know some parents want to, and they want them to have the experience. It's not the stress. But I would just say you don't have to. So just keep that in mind if you're going in through the community college and not to the university. Some of the SAT and the ACT, as I mentioned, all schools are not created equally. you're going to want to check with each university individually to see what their requirements are, because some are test optional, some require both, some's one or the other, some will take the highest scores of each section. They're all different in what they do. Again, I found that very annoying. Like, can we just have one universal group of rules that we're going to follow? But it doesn't work like that. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing, sorry that it is not on this slide, but the TSI, the Texas Success Initiative, this is going to be required for any Texas schools going into the university or the community college, and they're going to test reading, writing, and math. There's 3 sections. You could pass reading and fail math, pass math, fail, writing, okay? But what the TSI is going to do is let the schools know if the student is ready, okay? Are they ready to take 4 credit classes on the college level? And so if they don't pass any one of those sections, then they cannot take 4 credit classes until they pass that section. So what I want to mention here is there are all kinds of, and you can check with the community college in your area. Do you have practice tests for a TSI? All the community colleges have practice tests for TSI. They're free. There are also ones online that you can purchase, and we've used both at my household, and I liked the ones that we paid for better than the free ones. I felt like that they were. I think that they better prepared the student. It's up to you, but just know about the TSI and taking that and kind of seeing, and that might be when we're kind of meeting the child where they are, might be instrumental in your decision-making process of what are the next steps and where are we going from here. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that.
And Allison, the TSI does allow accommodations as well. Again, youngest daughter's about to start taking that, and oral admin is allowed there.
So yes, so asking for those, you definitely want to do that. Sorry we spent so much time on that, but it's so important. I know one time I have one that has graduated from college, and when we started at the community college, I won't say which one, they were so behind. We had provided them everything, and they were just behind in delivering the accommodations. So we did start the semester with our hands behind our back, and it was not because we didn't do what we were supposed to do, but it was frustrating at the very least. So these are some of the educational options post high school. We don't work for them. They don't work for us. These are just some of the ones that we know that are out there. They may be on the list because they have a good Office of Disability. We know they have a good Office of Disability. They might be on the list because they have a specific program for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Some of these are certificate programs. Some of them are degree programs. And the bottom line is you want to research these early. You can email us at contact@cpgcares.net to get a list of some of the post-high school educational options because we do have a longer list out there. But you're going to want to be aware. And again, another annoying thing is that none of these schools are on the same calendar as when their applications open and close. So when you're doing this, you might want to create yourself a spreadsheet. When does this open? How many openings do they have? When does it close? Because it would be nice if they all universally opened and closed at the same time, because that would be easy to keep that on track in our mind, but it just doesn't work like that. So, make your list and, find those things out. Where are they meeting? Are they meeting in person? Are they meeting online? How long is the program? Those types of things. And again, like I said, asking if you do have guardianship or plan to have guardianship of your loved one, make sure that they do accept people into the program that are under full guardianship. Okay, campus connections. Bloom Consulting, again, we don't work for them. They don't work for us. They do have a connection with vocational rehab, so you may have heard of them before if your child is in VR. They have a campus connections program that we like. It is a private pay. Sometimes VR pays for it if it's in line with the Get to Work plan with VR. It's private pay at $1,000 a month, but it's basically a wraparound program and really a coach to empower students to problem solve their concerns more effectively on the college level. This has taken mom and dad out of the equation a little bit as the coach. because a lot of our teenagers don't want to hear from us anymore on that kind of stuff. They won't want our advice, but somebody else's advice is golden. So this is a good program. If your child, maybe they could live on campus, but they need a little help, this wraparound program is a pretty good idea. Bloom Consulting, if you're thinking about going to work instead of going to school, Bloom Consulting, I know, does really good vocational evaluations. And this is where they'll assess the student for, 3 or 4 days and find out what their impediments to employment are. So that way we can close those gaps on employment. So those vocational evaluations, again, they do have a partnership with VR, so that could be covered by your VR program. So you might want to ask about that as well. All right, so we want to talk about how do we get started with special needs planning. So we talked about a little bit in the beginning, really the difference between a special needs planner and a special needs attorney. I think what I would add to what, we already said about that, they're two different people. So one person might say, well, do I need the attorney or do I need the advisor? You need both. Okay, they both have separate functions and you need both. Okay, that's first and foremost. But what I would tell you is this is not a DIY project. We work with really smart people. We just truly do. And, we have a lot of, thought process of, I can do that. I'm smart enough. I can handle this. I'm going to do this, these DIY projects. Your situation is specialized. You do want to work with a specialist. And so I always encourage people, this is not your neighbor next door that says, yeah, I'm an attorney, I can do that. Where they draw up your paperwork, or, your brother that's a corporate attorney or a real estate attorney. We have a ton of attorneys that we work with, right? But they're not nuanced and special needs, right? And so you really, really want to work with a specialist. Your situation is specialized. When you do the DIY project and you download documents online, they're wrong. You end up paying the right attorney to fix the things. And the thing is it's too important. If something happens to mom or dad becomes disabled or dies, and your documents are wrong, and there's money in the wrong buckets and all of these things, disaster ensues. So there's things that we can cut corners on and things that we shouldn't. And this is one that I would say we totally recommend that you don't cut corners on that. You want to work with a special needs planner to help you formulate your plan. The thing is when it comes to planning, we always have our kids top of mind, and their needs and what's going on. But when it comes to planning, the truth is we have a big mountain in front of us. Most families, from a retirement perspective, we're going to spend 25 to 35 years in retirement. That is a long time. And if we have a child with a disability or an adult child, whoever they may be, with a disability that may have care needs for the rest of their life, that's like a third bucket for retirement. So a lot of people feel overwhelmed with the whole idea of 25 to 35 years in retirement and funding their own retirement, but we throw that third bucket in there. It's pretty scary. So we can help you with those things. And the key to that is, you don't have to be a millionaire. Okay, it helps. It's great. But you don't have to be there to start planning. The key is making intentional and incremental steps towards your goal to get to where you need to be. So how much longer are you going to work? You've got another, 10, 15, 20 years. It's the knobs that we turn now that's going to make a difference. You might not have all of the world's problems solved for your own retirement or your child's future, their future care, or funding their special needs trust, but those intentional steps that we take now and those incremental turns to those knobs are going to make a difference. So we want you to gather all the planning documents necessary. What does that look like? They're all your statements. What benefits do you have through work? What do you have outside of work? Life insurance, long-term care, disability, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, pensions, 401ks, 403bs, it goes on and on and on, okay? Your social security statements, any legal documents that you already have in place, wills, powers of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, any of those types of things, you're going to want to gather all of your documents. I digress just for a moment because a little while ago we were talking about that FERPA document that you need for the colleges to be able to talk to mom or dad. I just want to put this in here right now that I strongly recommend a healthcare power of attorney and a power of attorney for your student, neurotypical or diverse, when they're going to college. It's really, really important. We saw a lot of mental health crises, kids that were taken to a mental health facility from school, no healthcare power of attorney in place. And guess what, mom and dad? They're not even going to tell you what facility they took them to, okay? They won't tell you what's going on, where they're at, what's happening, nothing. So I don't want to scare anybody. I'm just telling you, it's really, really important. Healthcare power of attorney, that is something that you probably could download offline without, you could probably get that. It's just really important. It needs to be notarized. And then the other thing is do you have a healthcare power of attorney and power of attorney in place? And then your aging parents, have they updated theirs, and do they have one? Don't, please, because this is what is disastrous. Don't wait for the crisis to happen and say, oh, snap, we should have had that. Just get it done and have those intentional conversations with your family members that you love to make sure that they've got it done as well. Sorry for that little rabbit hole, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So we also want you to develop a letter of intent. I speak of this as basically a family love letter. As caregivers and parents, we know more. I always say we forgot more than anybody will ever know about caregiving our loved ones, right? But what if you're incapacitated? What if you can't talk? What if you're no longer here on this earth? Does even the other family member in the household or the future caregiver know all of these things? So a letter of intent, Consolidated Planning Group has a template. It's actually 20 pages long, which sounds a little scary. It's all form fillable, but this is everything to do with your loved one with a disability. What are their diagnoses? What meds do they take? What makes them tick? What makes them fall apart? Whatever it is. Religious preferences. What schools have they attended? Names, address, and phone numbers of all of the doctors. It really goes on, but it also has a lot of free space where you can say what your heart is. As a parent, this is my heart. I want you to know this. You need to know this. If you have to step into my shoes in an emergency, if you don't do anything else right, do this. That's basically what it says. And so I think that, families need to have one of those. I think it's important, and those will often go alongside of your other legal documents, wills, special needs trust, guardianship, things like that. So it's very, very important. And then number 5 here, we've gone through step 4 here of developing a letter of intent. Number 5 is formulate your vision of how you hope things will look for your special needs child. But most importantly here is how you hope things will look for the vision for your future. As parents, we don't have to be told to look out for our kids. We're always looking out for our kids to a fault, to our own demise, to our own health, So what I want you to do, if you're in it, I think of this as a marathon, not a sprint. So if you have a loved one that's going to be with you for the rest of their life, they're not going to grow up and necessarily get out. They're always going to have some level of need of care. Your semblance of retirement is a little bit different, right? And you have got to have some balance in there. It's not just full-time caregiving until I'm 80 years old, right? So there is some balance in there. So thinking about your vision is important. Benisha, I think we have a couple of questions. Read those questions to me. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry.
I do that about 10 times a day.
Yes. Their comments, it says use Mama Bear legal forms online for power of attorney, healthcare, and finance, also HIPAA and FERPA release.
Most of the schools will have their own FERPA release that they're going to need. And again, those are the only things. It's like the healthcare power of attorney and power of attorney are really the only things that I think you're better off to download. If you're not going to work with an attorney, you're better off to download those from online and have them than not have them at all. So that for sure. So thank you for sharing that.
It also says, where do you get the 20-page document that you mentioned?
That is the letter of intent, and we will attach that today with today's slides. So you're going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording, and we'll go ahead and attach a copy of the letter of intent template for you as well. I always say give yourself some grace on the letter of intent. It's long and it's real. It asks a lot of questions, and as you're reflecting as a parent, it could be triggering. It's not meant to be triggering, but if you think about what was, when you start thinking about hopes and dreams and what you hoped the hopes and dreams were and what they were and how things turned out, good, bad, or indifferent, it could be an emotional thing. I don't recommend you sit down and do this in one sitting. If you're super mom or dad and you want to do that, you absolutely can. But if you haven't had a letter of intent all this time, if you take a month or two to get it done, just give yourself a timeline and, sit down with it in spurts, I think is my suggestion with that. Let's talk about planning for the future. So I think, really the key thing, and we're talking about those intentional steps and incremental turning of the knobs. Developing a future care plan now will answer questions when it comes to your loved one. I mean, oftentimes, I think every week, if I had just even a nickel for every week when somebody says, who's going to care for my child when I'm gone? How much do I need to fund the special needs trust? I know my child has care needs, but I don't know how much that looks like. Or, my child isn't quite there yet, but I'm still hopeful and optimistic, but I want to plan for the worst and hope for the best are some of the things that people come to us on. So we're able to, kind of get down in the weeds of how much you need to fund a special needs trust. And I always say, think small, medium, and large. We are fans of planning for the worst and hoping for the best, because when the best happens, then you just have a more lucrative retirement. Maybe you retire earlier. But when we plan for the best and the worst happens, then we're unprepared, and maybe you have to work a lot longer. Maybe you can't do the things that you thought you were going to do. So that's why, the planning is so important. How do we maximize Social Security benefits for my whole family? It could be Social Security benefits, could be SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and answering those questions of what's going to happen to your loved one if they have care needs once you're gone. And for some families, that's very scary. I hear weekly, hey, it's me. It's the end of the line. There is nobody else. I didn't have any other kids. I don't have any siblings. My parents are deceased. Or my family is, our other family members are not capable. They're not willing. They're not capable. There's no way we would do that, or, what have you. So just let's think about those things. So when we think about how our children's care, our loved ones' care is going to be funded in the future, we want you to preserve the eligibility for state and federally funded programs. Now, let's be real, folks. This is not going to fund your child's care long term, okay? We're talking on monthly stipend, okay? So SSI and Medicaid. Let's talk about SSI. SSI is a means-based program for the indigent and the disabled. A lot of our children haven't qualified for SSI prior to them turning 18 because it was based off of your income and assets, and you simply made too much. Once they turn 18, it's based off of their income and assets, not yours, even if you have guardianship of said child. You're going to want to apply for SSI and Medicaid after they turn 18, not before. If you apply the week before they turn 18, you're going to get denied because they're going to, look at your income. Right now, SSI is $914 per month. That's the full benefit. If they're paying rent, or you've submitted a rent agreement, $914 a month. It would be reduced by 1/3 if they're not paying rent. Okay, so that's the deal. So we all agree, $914 per month is not nothing. However, it is certainly not enough to live off of, right? So that's, what I'm saying is that we've got to, when we look at the blocks of building a plan for somebody, there's a lot of different places that funding is coming for our children's care. So another place is Social Security disability and Medicare, okay? And this is a little bit confusing. A lot of times there's confusion. Guys, we have a whole webinar on our YouTube channel about SSI and Social Security and the differences between the programs and how they all work. People are confused why our kids don't qualify for Social Security disability. I mean, after all, the child's disabled, it only makes sense they would qualify for Social Security disability. However, SSI is an entitlement program, and Social Security disability you pay into that. When we work, we have working quarters, and we pay into the Social Security disability system. So our kids, if they haven't worked, they haven't paid in. So that's why they might be denied for Social Security disability. When our kids' disability started prior to age 22, with the Social Security Administration, they have the ability to be covered under a parent's record when a parent has either retired through Social Security or turned on their disability benefits through the Social Security Administration. That disabled adult child, they called them DAC for 40 years, disabled adult child. They changed the name recently, the last couple of years, to Childhood Disability Benefits, CDB. They have the right to be covered under that parent's record. So for example, if Benisha's benefit is $4,000 a month, she is drawing Social Security. She's turned on her Social Security and her benefit is $4,000 a month. She has a disabled child that's disability started prior to age 22, a disabled adult child that's disability started prior to age 22. If Benisha's benefits $4,000 a month, that child is going to be entitled to $2,000 a month. It's not going to decrease Benisha's benefit, but that child would be entitled to $2,000 a month under retirement survivors disability income. So basically at that point, they would switch over from the SSI program over to the childhood disability benefits under the parent's record. It's very confusing. Entire 1-hour webinar on the whole thing. And again, we are nationally certified as Social Security advisors, so we can definitely help you with that. There's all kinds of one-off little things that have happened where the kid has worked and the kid hasn't worked and parent has passed away. We can get in the weeds with all of that, but not in this setting, but we can definitely help you with that. So those are two state or federally funded programs. Another place that you can have money outside of, the means-based test. So SSI has a means-based test. You have to be indigent and disabled, and that means-based test is $2,000. So no more than $2,000 in that individual's name. If they have more than $2,000, that more than $2,000 needs to be in a special needs trust or an ABLE account. Special Needs Trust and ABLE accounts are two places where we can have money above and beyond the means-based test that won't be counted against them for the asset qualifications for SSI. Okay, so that's very, very important. Another place that we fund our kids' care. So yes, you could fund your kids' care with your current assets or your retirement assets. It's questionable on whether or not you should use IRA assets to fund the child's care. And the other question, that's a big question mark, is, most people spend 25 to 35 years working and saving money. And most people are going to need the money that they saved over 25 to 35 years over the next 25 to 35 years that they're going to spend in retirement. So saying that you're going to use your retirement money to fund the special needs trust is oftentimes not really, realistic, okay, because you're going to need that money. So what a lot of people do is they have life insurance on their lives, mom and dad, maybe sometimes the siblings, and the beneficiary of that life insurance is the special needs trust for the individual with the disability, okay? So those are ways. We never want to name an individual with a disability directly as a beneficiary on anything we have, because we don't ever want them to have more than $2,000 in their name outside of a special needs trust or an ABLE account, or they will disqualify from SSI and Medicaid. We have complete programs, presentations regarding the waivers, the Medicaid waivers in the state of Texas. All of the waivers in the state of Texas require Medicaid eligibility, because some people say, what do I care about Medicaid? I have group health insurance. We have great health insurance. I don't even like Medicaid. I don't want Medicaid. Why do I need this? And that's a valid question. But the answer is, it's not because we love it and we think it's great. It's because you have to maintain the Medicaid eligibility for any of those waivers in the state of Texas: HCS, Texas Home Living, Community First Choice, CLAS, the YES waiver. There's an MDCP. There's so many different waivers out there, but they're all Medicaid waivers. So even if you are not a lover of Medicaid, you want to maintain that eligibility. If you hope to have a waiver, or you hope to keep a waiver, that you were on the waiting list in Texas for 17 years before you got. So this is a really important consideration. As far as the ABLE accounts are concerned, it's tax-free and investing, tax-free distributions. You can put $17,000 a year into it, and an additional $13,590 if the individual with the disability is working. That additional amount can be put in. The disability had to begin prior to 26. There is legislation changing, and I think it's not till 2026 that they're moving that the disability had to begin before age 46. So they are changing the eligibility for that. So that's kind of a favorable thing that is on the horizon. So some of the things that you just need to know is that the beneficiary is the account owner. It's under the tax code 529A. The income earned is not taxable and contributions are not deductible. But the big thing you got to know is it does not jeopardize SSI, Medicaid, or any other public benefits. So this is important to know. And the other thing to know is that there is a such thing as a Medicaid payback on an ABLE account. And this is where if the individual was eligible for Medicaid, if the individual passes away, that they will do a look back to see if there is any clawback or drawback or Medicaid payback. And so the bottom line with an ABLE account, you're really never going to want it to have more than $100,000 in an ABLE account, because once it goes over $100,000, then it would be countable for SSI and Medicaid. So oftentimes people will say, why do I need an ABLE account and a special needs trust? Because the ABLE account can't have more than $100,000 before disqualifying. And also an ABLE account can pay for food and shelter without a reduction to SSI. A special needs trust can pay for food and shelter, like monthly debt service, rent, or mortgage payments, things like that. But there would be a 1/3 reduction for SSI. Okay. So when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? So a special needs trust is going to preserve the benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. If we have a loved one with a disability who's going to have care needs for the rest of their life, when we do those future care cost estimates, small, medium, and large, they're millions of dollars depending on the small, medium, and large of what we're looking at, right? So obviously a lot more than $100,000 than what the ABLE account can hold. So it's really, really important that you have intentional conversations. Number one, your kids, your disabled children should never be named outright as the beneficiary on anything you have, The special needs trust for the benefit of said child is how the beneficiary should be lined up. So that way the money goes into the right bucket, preserves their eligibility for these programs, okay? Also, I would suggest, since we were talking about powers of attorney and healthcare power of attorneys and intentional conversations with your aging parents, if any of you have aging parents that are affluent that might leave a large sum of money to their beloved grandchild, their financial advisor is not nuanced in special needs, and they absolutely do not know not to name their grandchild directly. They have to be told. You have to tell them, we've set up a special needs trust, and this is how we leave money properly for little Danny, so that way he preserves his eligibility for benefits. Their advisor, their banker, absolutely does not know this, and you have to have intentional conversations with them. Guardianship can be started, the process can be started 6 months prior to the child turning 18. In Texas, the law really is least restrictive, most appropriate, and they use the word ward, W-A-R-D, which I really don't like that word. Least restrictive, most appropriate for the individual is what the law says. There's guardianship, there's alternatives to guardianship, such as partial guardianship. There is in Texas, we have something called supported decision-making, and of course, there's power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney that goes alongside with the supported decision-making agreement. Folks, you don't have to know what you need. It's okay. You want to work with an attorney, a qualified attorney, under their licenses. They're required to help walk you through the steps, explain what the steps are, and help kind of figure out the right path. So if you say, I don't even know what we need, and a lot of times when our kids are 18, the jury's out, okay? Their brains aren't even fully formed until 18. One could argue that our neurotypical kids need guardianship at 18. It's kind of a joke. But the thing is just know that you don't have to have all the answers. A qualified attorney is going to walk you through very gently what the steps are. And what I would also tell you is I'd like to invite you to our YouTube channel for that as well. We have complete presentations on guardianship and alternatives to guardianship out there. So if you're wondering what's required in Texas, what to do, what not to do, how it all works, you can check out that webinar as well. But let's, just think about that early. Don't don't wait and then not have something in place to where to where you can't provide the help that you need to your student. Some of these additional resources, Dude, Where's My Transition Plan? This is actually another state's, transition resource book, but it was pretty good. So we put that out there. Not the Dude, Where is my transition plan, but the Oregon Transition Handbook was actually good. Texas Reality Check is a really good one. It's a good website that you can check out. And this is good for your kids that are like, I can't wait to move out. I'm moving out of here. I can't wait. The Texas Reality Check is a real good one for them to figure out, okay, well, let's talk about that. This is good. Let's work towards your goal. What is the reality of moving out? And what is that, what does that look like? And that kind of thing. So do check that one out. I did see in our chat box, our YouTube channel is Consolidated Planning Group, and we are going to have that. There is going to be a link when we send the email later with the slides and the recording and I always call it the family love letter, the document that we're going to send along with everything. We'll have a link to our YouTube channel as well. So you'll have that, and it'll also be in the slides. Think about transition and residential programs. There are, this is one, there's so many, and they're all over, they're all over the state, not just in Houston or Dallas or San Antonio, wherever. There are all kinds of transition programs, and we do have lists for that. Here are some different ones. We always, again, Reach Unlimited, we don't work for them, they don't work for us, but there are some ones that we've heard about. What if your kid isn't ready? Okay, there are some gap year residential programs, and this one's out of state in Massachusetts, but it's a cool one. I think high functioning autism, ADHD, maybe from a maturity perspective, we're not quite there yet. You might think of a gap year. This is one that's worth checking out. We have, and this is going to just be a link to our upcoming webinars. We do webinars every single week on topics that matter to our families and kind of the stuff that we're on and what we're doing. So you will have a link to all of our upcoming webinars, and you can register for those. And we will see you on those next ones. We've kind of talked about a lot of things today, and I know that we're running out of time, but some of the things that should really be on your radar, we have webinars on every single one of these topics: developing a special needs care plan, future care cost estimates, Texas waivers. And just if you're joining us from out of state today, there are Medicaid waivers in every state. Okay, so some of the waivers that I mentioned earlier, the names might be different in your state, but you have waivers as well. SSI and SSDI, understanding the difference, knowing when to apply. ABLE accounts, beneficiary designations, we talked about that. Special needs trust, how to fund them. One thing we haven't talked about, and I just want to mention it really quick here, is if you have a child with a disability and you're getting child support, and that child support is going to continue post age 18, you need to get that redirected to a first party special needs trust prior to applying for SSI, or that's going to be counted against them for SSI as their income. So that is super important. We do have I have a couple of attorneys that we refer to do this. The special needs attorney that's going to do the wills and trust and guardianship and all of those other things, they don't do child support stuff. They'll set up the trust so the child support can go to the trust, but you're going to need to work with a different attorney that's going to redirect the child support to the special needs trust. So we have some referrals for that are attorneys that are definitely nuanced in special needs. Think about transition programs, residential programs, all the different programs out there. If it's higher education, college, community college, whatever, start touring, get your name on the list. Some of these waiting lists are long. So that way it's going to give yourself the options to say yes, as opposed to you want to go somewhere and there's no room. Okay. Guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, we hit on that. And these post high school options, we have entire webinars on just post-high school options for individuals with disabilities. We work on a collaborative team here at Consolidated Planning Group, a collaborative team of awesome, and I always like to put some faces with the names. So should you work with us going forward, we do work collaboratively. It's not just me, it is the whole group. And you may hear from our staff, kind of reaching out and inviting you to a free personalized consultation. Anytime we have a webinar, there's a lot of questions that people want to ask that they don't ask because they don't want to put their all their stuff out there to the whole world. So if you have questions that we didn't answer today and you want to meet with us personally, our consultations are always free. And this QR code here on the screen will take you to a calendar where you can book your free personalized consultation. We have the Consolidated Planning Group Facebook page and the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel that you can find. And like I said, you can subscribe to those for free, and all of our past webinars live out there. So, Benicia, I know that we've come to the end of our time with 1 minute to spare. Do we have any additional questions? I'm happy to take any additional questions before we go today.
There's nothing additional in the chat box.
All right. Well, certainly it has been my pleasure to be with everyone today. I know spring is in the air and spring break is on the horizon. So have fun, everyone, and let us know if we can be of assistance to you going forward. Certainly my pleasure. Nice to see you again, Benicia, and we'll look forward to partnering with you again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to all the families that joined as well.
Thank you. Take care. Bye now.